At the 2000 Game Developers Conference, Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates announced the Xbox, the company's first game console. The project came together over 2.5 years of meetings, setbacks, and in fighting over everything from graphics chips to the size of the Duke controller to disastrous showings at industry events.
E3 in 2001 was kind of a disaster. No, that's being too polite. It was a disaster. We made the decision, which turned out to be wrong, that we wanted to show Xbox games running at E3. And we made that decision because we wanted people to believe that the product was real and that it was going to ship on time. And we needed developers to finish their titles. And that meant showing Halo. It meant trying to show a box that when you pressed the button, it turned on. Even if the games running in our booth were going to be on PC development kits, that was actually okay.
You know, when we showed at the final E3 before launch, what we had on the show floor was a 4-player split-screen multiplayer demo, which the Bungie guys were really proud of. I think rightfully so. You know, that's hard to do even today. You know, and doing it on that hardware at that time was really incredible. But the thing is, we were running on half-speed hardware. The graphics card was half speed of what it was going to be in the shipping game or shipping Xbox. And so, the frame rate wasn't great, and just people had a mediocre experience. But again, also it sort of played into the idea that we were a PC gaming company that didn't know about console. We didn't have a Mario or a Sonic or something, you know. I would get that question, yeah, who's your mascot?
We're trying to build this game super quickly, and we know we have this date, you know, like we know this has to be done for Xbox launch. Like, that's the whole point they bought the studio. That's the whole point they bought the game. It has to be done. And so we're getting it done and we're building it. And there's a point where we're basically just doing Gold Master. We're doing like art release candidates. So we're just, everyone's basically the studio doing nothing. We're just playing the game. We're just like there to make sure that like final bugs are fixed.
But at our press briefing, the morning after, Sony took all the press people on a long party, and they were all, hung over for an 8 o'clock briefing from Microsoft, where I pressed the button and the box didn't turn on. I mean, Electronic Arts came to demonstrate a game they were doing for us, which was a pirate game. And the demo, because the guy didn't do it right, the demo consisted of a ship bumping itself into rocks. A bad moment. That whole press briefing was bad.
Okay, let me see if I can. Whoa, okay.
We're working on it. We're going to get you.
It's amazing what you can afford once you get out of the hardware business. It really is.
I'll leave the floor.
With $500 million to spend.
Fascinating. That's fascinating. Yeah, I might want to use that sometime, Bill.
Well, thanks, Rock. And it really is an honor to have you here.
The time it would take to sign on hardware manufacturers for the system's processor and graphics tech, not to mention recruiting software companies to make games, rendered a holiday 2000 launch impossible. Knowing that they couldn't miss another holiday, Microsoft penciled in a launch date of November 8th, 2001. But then, the events of September 11th changed everything.
American 11, are you trying to call?
The cockpit is not answering their phone. Our number 1 has been staffed, and our 5 has been staffed.
I'm going to call from Washington. I am in a situation with American 11, a possible hijack.
What's going on, Betty? The aircraft is erratic again. Problem, very erratic. Betty, talk to me. Eddie, are you there? Eddie? Eddie?
I was supposed to do a bunch of press in Manhattan on September 11th.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a new set of demos that we were working on, and they were late. And so I moved my flight to be a red-eye going into JFK on September 10th, and got on the plane and fell asleep. And I had, I think, either 3 or 6 Xboxes. Xbox, like late prototype units, just pre-release units, in a big anvil case, okay, in the cargo hold of the airplane.
Yeah.
And I woke up. It was a JetBlue flight, and from Seattle to JFK, which I had to move off of United because I switched my flight. And I woke up to CNN, because at that point, JetBlue had live TV, which is their big thing, right? Nobody else had live media. You were like sealed in a tube, and you had no idea what the news was, except on JetBlue.
Right.
At the time. I woke up as the attack was happening, and I actually saw from the air the second plane hit. The flight attendant fainted. The guy next to me was freaking out. I was in the window seat. CNN was on, and the Pentagon got attacked, and nobody knew what was going on. And the captain got on and said, I'm an Air Force pilot, an ex-Air Force pilot, and we're going to be okay, and I'm getting us out of here.
Well, so I was scheduled on 9/11 to have a meeting to start a press tour in New York City, and to have a meeting with the Wall Street Journal, I think about 1:30, somewhere down near the World Trade Center, not in the World Trade Center, but Wall Street Journal had an office somewhere down in the lower part of Manhattan. So things were just crazy at that point. And so I decided to take a red-eye to New York. The night of the 10th, landing the morning of the 11th. Landed at Kennedy, I'm going to say somewhere around 6:30 that morning. And took a cab to the Marriott Marquis in Midtown, New York. A lovely hotel I have not been to since. And got in my room, went up to my room, and went to sleep. And then I woke up a couple hours later, must have been 9:15, I don't know, 9:30, somewhere in there. And hopped in the shower, came out of the shower, and I phone. And so I picked it up, and it was a guy whose name I've forgotten, unfortunately. And he was the chief legal counsel for our PR agency. And he said to me, he says, Robbie, I'm sorry your press tour has been disrupted, but I wanted you to know that my offices are across the street. If there's anything you need while you're in New York, just let me know. And I said to him, so what are you talking about? And so he had me turn on the TV.
"9/11 cast a pall over America. With planes grounded, Xbox developers in the city had to think outside the box to get home. Chief Xbox Officer Robbie Bach rented a car with 3 other individuals, none of whom knew each other that well, and embarked on a cross-country road trip back to Seattle. Seamus Blackley went from New York to Canada, where Xbox co-creator Kevin Bacchus met him at the border and drove him the rest of the way. Ed Fries, who was doing press in San Francisco during the attack, still had to span travel agencies with calls to arrange a flight home. There was little time to process the fallout from 9/11. With 2 months remaining before launch, Microsoft's developers distracted themselves by channeling all their energy into one final sprint. Fun, they believed, was the best medicine, not only for themselves, but for the millions of gamers looking for an escape.
Our original ship date for Xbox, the original Xbox, was November 8th, 2001. And it slipped about 7 days to the 15th, which was kind of the last day we could launch it, because once you got to Thanksgiving, retailers wouldn't stock new products on the shelf. I think about 9/11 a lot. I mean, it features in a lot of my writing and other things that I do. But in a way, it sort of galvanized me, I think. I think of it in many respects as a turning point for the project, which is weird because it was disruptive to the project. It made the project significantly tougher. But, you know, to me, it was sort of a turning point. It's like, okay, well, we just have to get this done. And we're not going to let anything get in the way.
You know, in a way, my stress had mostly been a few months earlier, like getting things shipped. Once they're shipped, they're out of your hands. You know, when you're the product team, it's like we handed off the gold masters. They go into manufacturing. They get stamped. They get packaged. Packages get shipped to stores all over. You know, and that all happens a few months before launch. So. Back in those days, no day one patches or anything like that. You know, it's like, so kind of from that, you know, whatever that was, late September, early October on, I was just pretty much in pure PR mode, just there to support, you know, talking to game magazines and stuff like that.
Looking to make the biggest media splash possible, Microsoft coordinated a midnight launch event at a flagship Toys R Us store located in Times Square, New York. For some members of the development team, that meant returning to the site of one of the most traumatic events in our nation's history, as well as their lives.
If I'm honest about it, there's a bit of PTSD as well, right? So there's the excitement of the launch and sort of the, oh my gosh, I'm back in the city where this catastrophe happened and I drove 55 hours across the country with 3 people I didn't know that well to get home. It's an interesting sociological dynamic, let's just say that.
There was a press event earlier in the day at the WWE, or whether maybe they were WWF then. They had a building across the street from the Toys R Us, and there was a thing where he and The Rock played, I think, several games together.
The Rock is cutting edge. Xbox is going to be cutting edge. The Rock is exhilarating. Xbox is going to be exhilarating when you play it. The Rock is the most electrifying man in sports entertainment. Xbox is going to be the most electrifying console, period. So there's a lot of qualities very similar in The Rock and Xbox. So it's a good combo.
As the clock struck 12 on November 15th, Bill Gates presented the first Xbox to the first Toys R Us customer in line.
Where Microsoft Chairman Bill Gates showed up to launch his new product at midnight.
And I remember hanging out there, waiting for it to get, dark, get to midnight, and then we walked across, and I walked across the street there in Times Square with Bill Gates. And then we got over to the other side, and then there were some press people took him along the line of people waiting, and he shook a bunch of hands and stuff like that. And I went into the building, and then we waited till midnight. And I didn't really have a role that night. I wasn't giving away the first Xbox. Bill Gates was. I was just kind of really hanging out and enjoying just watching this thing that we worked on, seeing all the boxes on the shelves, seeing, people excited to come in and buy it and walking out with big smiles on their face and big packages of the games that we had worked so hard on under their arms.
There's no question that the energy of the launch event had an impact on me. I felt optimistic and excited, even though I knew our Japan launch was not going to be great and the European launch, who the hell knew, right? But in the background, there's all this stuff that's still a mess. But the energy of that event and that day, and seeing people, when you create something and people are lined up in New York City around the block at the largest Toys R Us in the country. It was pretty exciting. The CEO of Microsoft is signing boxes inside.
You know, there was this thing where Seamus proposed to his fiancée there. Yeah, I remember him, you know, on one knee and proposing to Van Burnham, and her saying yes, and it just being another kind of cool and magical part of that evening.
I had this weird thing where when, because I had made that decision, where I decided to not care about the Microsoft ladder anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and there were guys who you talked to who were really into it, man. Okay,
I know.
If they admit it or not, really into that ladder, and where you were on it, and who just could not understand why the fuck I was doing anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had such painful conversations with these people, and when Bill agreed to like hold my ring for my wedding, for my marriage proposal,
yeah.
I thought to ask him. I think it was when we were at CES, because I was on doing the keynote at CES with Bill, which is pretty cool. And I asked him backstage, and I didn't think anything of it, right? And then afterward, and he said, okay. And then the only thing I heard from him afterwards, like, what if she says no? Which is fine. I'm like, she's not going to say no. But afterward, I would start telling this story to some of the ladder type people at Microsoft. And they'd be like, are you fucking crazy? You don't ask Bill that shit. And it never occurred to me not to ask him. I felt really, I loved the guy. It never occurred to me. If he had said no, he didn't feel comfortable, I wouldn't have cared. And I also I think he would have thought it was hilarious that I asked him.
Mm-hmm.
And so when people play the ladder game, they're missing out on the fact that Bill's a human being. He built this whole thing. Like he's a weirdo. He's great.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's interesting. Never occurred to me not to ask him.
So when we finished, everyone was exhausted. We were just happy that we made it. Like we got the thing out the door and it wasn't crashing. I remember we had a commercial, 30-second commercial, and it was going to be on like Tuesday at midnight. So like, I think I stayed up, or I had my parents stay up and watch it. I was like, hey, it's a commercial. And I thought that was it. I thought, all right, I got to make a game. It actually was on a TV commercial. Hopefully people play it. Let's figure out what we're doing next. I didn't even know if I was going to have a job after that, honestly.
When it seems like all is lost, when it feels as if you have no hope, when you are outnumbered, overpowered, and they've got you cornered, that's when you realize your last best hope is you. Halo, Combat Evolved, rated M for mature.
I remember going into the office that day, it was either that day or the day right before, and picking up my like special edition green transparent Xbox and like all the launch titles, and not going home, but hanging out at the office with the people we just spent like 14 months with, locked in the same room, like playing Fusion Frenzy. Like just playing games. Like it was cool. Like it was, I don't think I appreciated, like at the time you're like, this is a thing Microsoft's trying to do, it also tried to do Microsoft Bob. Well, you don't know if this will be successful. Like, no clue. Like, but it felt like, it felt like not an event. It felt good to have contributed something to that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That was interesting. That was cool.
For Microsoft's developers, launching the Xbox marked the end of the beginning. There were more games to support, console launches in other regions to oversee, and Xbox Live, the company's revolutionary gaming service, to build and launch the following year.
I had shipped a lot of products at that time, you know, in my career. But I had, you know, I had never done anything. I mean, you know, I was part of the team that made the first version of Excel for Windows, shipped a bunch of Excels, and we, you know, got to go through the experience of seeing something we made on store shelves and go to launch events and stuff like that, and working on Word, lots of PC gaming launches. But this was a whole nother, order of magnitude. I mean, I remember being in London, I don't even know if this was before or after, and we're on TV doing press things, you know, and being interviewed by press reporters on TV and stuff, just stuff that generally hadn't risen to that level, you know, seeing Xbox on all the screens that night in Times Square, just a, you know, it's kind of like that banshee crashing and like sliding towards my face that we talked about earlier. You know, they're both really, you know, burned into my memory.
Yeah.
But I don't really remember how I felt. I mean, I wish I could say I was like, I felt like this way or that way.
Yeah.
I think it was just like happy that we did what we set out to do. And knowing that in a way it was just the start, you know, but trying to remind myself to enjoy it, not start to stress in advance too much about all the stuff we still had to do that's going on. I suspect it was thoughts like that were in my head. So I do remember it as a happy night and a, you know, kind of a carefree night, not a, you know, like I said, I didn't have any official role that night, so I could just sit back and enjoy it.